Future faking. One of the most powerful manipulation techniques does not rely on pressure, threats, or control. It relies on imagination. This technique is called future faking, and it works because the human brain is wired to invest emotionally in what could be, not just what is. Future faking happens when someone paints a detailed picture of a shared future plans, commitments, rewards, promises, without ever taking real steps to create that future. The language sounds convincing, the vision feels sincere, and because the future has not happened yet, it cannot be questioned in the present. The manipulation is not in the dream itself. The manipulation is in the delay. When future faking is working, the present becomes something you tolerate rather than evaluate. You excuse inconsistency, disrespect, or emotional distance because you are focused on what has been promised instead of what is happening. Over time, hope replaces evidence. Psychologically, this works because anticipation activates the brain's reward system. Dopamine is released not when the reward arrives, but when it is imagined. As long as the future sounds good, the mind stays engaged, even if reality remains unchanged. It is observation. Real futures create movement in the present. Fake futures stay verbal. Intermittent reinforcement. Intermittent reinforcement is one of the strongest conditioning mechanisms ever studied in psychology. It is the delivery of reward on an unpredictable schedule. Sometimes you receive attention, sometimes approval, sometimes warmth or validation, and sometimes nothing. This inconsistency creates a psychological loop. The brain becomes focused on uncertainty rather than stability. Instead of evaluating the relationship or situation as a whole, the mind starts chasing the next positive moment. This is the same mechanism used in gambling addiction. The unpredictability is what makes it powerful. If rewards were consistent, the brain would relax. But because they are inconsistent, the brain stays alert, engaged, and invested. In real behavior patterns, intermittent reinforcement looks like emotional highs followed by confusion. You remember the good moments vividly and minimize the absence that follows them. You begin adjusting your behavior to recreate the positive response. The defense is not emotional withdrawal. It is pattern recognition. Consistency builds trust. Inconsistency builds dependence. Moving the goalposts. Moving the goalposts is a manipulation technique that creates permanent inadequacy. It happens when expectations change the moment they are met. You complete what was asked, but instead of resolution, a new requirement appears. The standard shifts just enough that completion is always out of reach. Psychologically, this creates a sense of ongoing failure. You feel like you are always almost enough but never finished. This keeps you engaged, trying harder, and seeking approval that never fully arrives. In real behavior, moving the goalposts often appears disguised as growth, improvement, or higher standards. But genuine standards stabilize over time. Manipulative standards do not. The defense is clarity. If expectations are constantly changing without agreement or explanation, the goal was never improvement. It was control. Weaponized incompetence. Weaponized incompetence is the strategic performance of helplessness. It occurs when someone presents themselves as incapable in order to avoid responsibility. Tasks are done poorly, avoided or delayed until someone else takes over. Over time, responsibility shifts not through discussion but through exhaustion. Psychologically, this works because humans are problem solvers. When something is not getting done, someone will step in. And once the pattern is established, it becomes normalized. In real behavior patterns, one person becomes overloaded while the other appears dependent. The imbalance grows quietly without confrontation. The defense is accountability, not criticism. Inability without effort is not incapacity. It is avoidance. Moral licensing. Moral licensing occurs when someone uses past good behavior to justify present harm. I've done so much for you. After everything I've sacrificed, I'm not a bad person. Psychologically, moral licensing allows people to bypass self-correction. In their mind, previous good actions create permission for current behavior. The moral balance feels even when it isn't. In real behavior, this creates guilt. You feel hesitant to react because you are reminded of what has already been given. Accountability becomes framed as ingratitude. The defense is perspective. Past kindness does not erase present impact. Respect is not stored as credit. Selective memory. Selective memory is not simple forgetfulness. It is memory filtered by self-interest. Certain events are remembered clearly. Others are minimized, distorted, or forgotten entirely. The pattern is consistent. Memory favors the narrative that protects control. Psychologically, this destabilizes confidence. When your recollection is repeatedly questioned or contradicted, you begin doubting your perception. In real behavior, You may start documenting conversations or replaying interactions mentally, not for clarity but for self-defense. The defense is pattern focus. Individual memories can be debated. Patterns cannot. False urgency. False urgency creates pressure without necessity. Decisions must be made immediately. Time is framed as limited. The goal is not speed but compliance. Psychologically, urgency shuts down the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for reasoning. Emotional response takes over and agreement happens before evaluation. In real behavior, false urgency often leads to regret. You realize later that there was no real deadline, only pressure. The defense is simple. Anything legitimate can withstand time. Urgency that punishes thinking is manipulation. DARVO, victim reversal. DARVO stands for deny, attack, reverse, victim, and offender. When confronted with harmful behavior, the manipulator denies it, attacks the person raising the issue, and then positions themselves as the victim. The original concern disappears beneath emotional chaos. Psychologically, this works because humans are conflict-averse. Once emotions escalate, resolution becomes secondary to calming the situation. In real behavior, you may find yourself apologizing for bringing up a valid issue. The defense is focus. Accountability does not require emotional agreement. It requires behavioral clarity. Information withholding. Information withholding is control through absence. Details are delayed. Context is missing. Truth arrives in fragments. You are forced to respond without full understanding. Psychologically, this creates dependency. The person controlling information controls the pace and direction of decisions. In real behavior, confusion becomes normal. You feel responsible without being informed. The defense is expectation. Transparency is not a reward. It is a requirement. Overjustification effect. The overjustification effect occurs when intrinsic motivation is replaced by external pressure. What once felt voluntary becomes obligatory, meaning erodes. Psychologically, this drains engagement. People stop acting out of values and start acting out of avoidance. This is where manipulation becomes exhaustion. If you want to understand how the overjustification effect quietly changes motivation and behavior, that's something we'll explore next. If this kind of psychological clarity matters to you, consider subscribing and stay curious about how the human mind really works.